everyone, welcome to Random Active Squirrel. As I've noticed on all the YouTube channels, I visit to talk about movies and media and all that kind of stuff, records, whatever it is. They are doing their thing, which they call their 10 best or 10 worst or that kind of thing. I was thinking about it, and I think I've seen between, let's say 45, give or take a few movies either way this year. And so I decided I would make my list. And so today is called Act 36, Random Acts of Cinema, my list for 2023. So my list is going to be a little bit, my list I guess, different, unique, whatever you want to put it on there. Some of them are specific movies, some of them are like chunks of movies that I couldn't separate that came up as common themes throughout the year. But ultimately it's 10 talking points that I'm going to run through here. And per the usual, which usually gets said somewhere at the front and somewhere at the back, if you like what you're seeing, go ahead and hit the like button. If something spurs a thought, definitely put it down in the comment box. And if you're liking what you're seeing, as I usually ask, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thank you to all those who have already subscribed. And pretty soon, I think, well, I'm waiting for the end of the year because then I can find a job, and then I'll sound prettier, and then maybe more people will follow. But one can dream and one can hope. So I have it all written down, and I'll show it here at the end, so you guys can kind of, if you get excited about it, you can check into it. So number one on my list is anniversary re-releases. So these are movies that hit things like 20th anniversaries, 40th, whatever, 60th anniversary things. Movies that I knew existed, maybe have seen on VHS or DVD, but haven't ever seen them on a big screen, but felt I wanted to. So like The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston in it, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, just this big biblical epic. It was huge. I saw it the same week and I saw John Wick. I think I'd rather go see that over John Wick 4. I like John Wick 4. I don't have a problem with John Wick Chapter 4. It's like 3 hours long, and it's too long for an action movie. There's way too much. Whereas Ten Commandments is just cool to see something that's almost 60, almost 70 years old. I think it was like 50-something was made. So you're talking 70 years old? So it was cool to see that. They also did anniversary releases on They Live and Christine, which I went and made a point of seeing. They were at one of the theaters I go to, and it was like a one-day only kind of thing. They're John Carpenter classic movies, and it was a blast to see it. They Live has Roddy Piper in it. It's, I think, his only major acting role. He's a wrestler from the 80s and 90s. And Christine is kind of a cool story, seeing as I got older. It's almost a conversation of the push and pull that I think Carpenter is pulling out, I'm not sure, but of what King had underneath, where it just looks like it's a cycle car, but the car is almost like his addiction or obsession, which referred more to his writing and fame and that kind of stuff, which added a certain level of perspective to it. Number two is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant is, first of all, unique to anything of Guy Ritchie. He directed things like Snatch, I'm trying to think what else he can add there. He did King Arthur. He did some other stuff. He gets somewhat falsely described as being a poor man's version of Quentin Tarantino, and he's wild like it, but he's not Quentin Tarantino. What's interesting about this movie is, as a plot, I liked it. A guy goes over to Iraq, no, it's Afghanistan in this movie. I'm reading a book about a guy who's in Iraq right now. But, he goes to Afghanistan. His interpreter saves him. He finds out in the closing of borders that this guy gets left there, so he and a bunch of other people he gets to help goes and saves the interpreter who saved him. It's not specifically based on a true story, but it's based on many incidences that have occurred where they had to go back and save the interpreters. What really blew my mind is normally there's something snarky about a lot of movies, and it's a straightforward action movie with a really dramatic heart, and I really liked it. Number three is Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods. Not a great movie, but I love how the lead guy plays him. I like him as an actor too. I loved him in Chuck. It's Zach, and I'm forgetting his last name now. But I love him in that. I love the way he plays a character. It's, to be honest, most of the superhero movies were kind of lame this year. What I liked about it on the end is before you get to the end, and there's a certain element of sacrifice and heroism and family that all gets intertwined into the ending, and I really liked it for that. For me, it'll age better, and I'll keep watching it. Is it a great movie? By no means. Did I like it? Yes. Would I recommend everybody? Probably not, but it's on my list. I enjoyed it. Number 4 is Champions. This came kind of out of the blue in the early part of the year. It has Woody Harrelson in it, and I don't know how many people saw it, but I really liked it. Very simply described, it's Bad News Bears, only with mental or people with intellectual disabilities. He is a low-level basketball coach who is forced to coach a Special Olympics team. And what I love about it is the people playing it actually were people who had the mental disabilities. And they played them honestly, and I think it gave a certain window or openness into it. And with some of the stuff I deal with in my life, it was interesting because it was neat to actually see someone play it out right. The humor is right. It's a little more adult, so don't let kids watch it, but I really liked it for what it is. Number 5 is a big box. I'll just give a few of the names on here. I honestly think it's going to be a whole video for me. If I could do a whole nother thing, except my brain wasn't on it, I would say 2023 is the year Christian movies grew up. I remember seeing Christian movies, and they were junk. I mean, they were. If you were a fanboy into the world, if you were a diehard, like that was Christian stuff, you would watch it, but the quality wasn't there, the budget wasn't there, the writing wasn't there, the acting wasn't there. And what I liked about this year is, did I put the fourth one on there? Yeah, all right, there we go. There's 4 or 5 movies, and I might be missing some of them. And they made money, and they didn't suck, and they're actually pretty compelling. And the characters were fuller. They covered things that I hadn't seen before in other Christian movies, and they did it in an honest way that I had not seen before. So you had things like Jesus Revolution, which was more a biopic about the movement of the Jesus Revolution, not a whole Christian movie. So that was interesting about it. You had something like The Hill, which was compelling because it showed an older preacher, I think it was the Texas Baptist preacher, and showed both he could be harsh, but it also showed why he was harsh, why he was an old guard dog. There's something that was done by Duck Dynasty called The Blind, and that one was also, again, kind of interesting because Phil Robertson talked about the early parts of his life, and it wasn't neat, and it was the truth, and he was showing what it was before he got his life straightened around. So to see someone who was pretty famous in the celebrity department of the Christian world actually kind of lay his sins out and say, this is who I was before when I was a train wreck, it's pretty honest. Another one that I saw that was pretty compelling, kind of tied this box of stuff to something called The Shift, which leads into something I'll talk a little bit later. There's another big elephant in the room. We'll be talking about that. And that taps into the book of Job, but it's done in a science fiction or more modern thriller edge in a way I hadn't seen any Christian movie work before. So it almost doesn't feel like it's a Christian movie. In fact, there's really no open prayer calls or things like that go in it. It's very much a story where they take the heart of the book of Job, and the devil's not the devil. The devil is played by Neil McDonough, who's absolutely fantastic in the role, and he's known as the benefactor. They start playing with concepts like multiverses, which nobody knew about 3 years ago, but now everybody does. And the whole idea was that there's multiple versions of this main character, who I forget. I guess he's in a lot of Hallmark and Lifetime movies. And he is the only one that doesn't sort of fall to the will of the benefactor, so he gets everything taken away from him. And so it becomes very much like the book of Job. But it's not what you expect to see. Number 6, in a completely different tone, for some reason, this is not my usual genre, but I love the movie Strays. Strays it's like a very broken animal movie. You know, like it sounds like when I was growing up, they had a movie called The Incredible Journey, where a cat and 2 dogs, I think it is, or a cat and a dog, get separated from the owners, and then they have to come back to try to find them. That movie, except it's very broken. It's voiced by Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx. Will Ferrell is the sort of plucky, oblivious, most elf-like character. It's one of the voices of the dog. and Jamie Foxx is a streetwise dog, and they decide to go back and get revenge on their owner, all of which is in the trailer, none of which is going to surprise you. But it is very raw. There's a lot of F's and S's and vulgarity and that kind of stuff in it. And normally that's not my thing, but oh, it was funny. I really, really liked it. Number 7 is The Old Way, which is a movie that got released. I think it was the first movie I saw in 2023. It got billed as the first Nicolas Cage Western movie, which technically speaking it was. There's another one that got kind of snuck under the goalie and forgotten pretty quick, which is closer to being a Western movie. But for the general world, it's the first one that anybody ever actually really saw. I love this movie because there's certain things that both he as a character and his daughter are dealing with that struck very close to home. And there's certain scenes that deal with like proto-autism ideas, and I absolutely loved it. The plot of it is that Nicolas Cage is a bounty hunter, I think is probably the right term, and he changes his life, and someone from a child from someone that he ended up killing for bounty comes back to wreak havoc on his life. But it's the way he acts it, especially with the father-daughter dynamic, that I absolutely love. And it's probably not a great movie. There was like one of my videos that talks about the 3 Nicolas Cage movies I've seen or for the year. It's one of them I reviewed. I really liked it, especially if you like an old school cowboy movie. You kind of like watching him chew into a role and be a little bit crazy. And the girl who plays the daughter does a phenomenal job too. Number 8 is Godzilla -1, and this is probably on everyone's list, and it does belong there. Most movies that involve subtitles or monsters are going to alienate you, and I would say don't go see them because it's probably not your thing. It's a historical epic. There's so many boxes that this should not work, and it does. The story is fantastically told. The characters are amazing and relatable. They take Godzilla and turn him into a monster in this case, and he's not good or bad. He's a huge force of nature. And then it's buried underneath this whole sort of post-fog of war that happens where there's chaos and people's feelings, and the world that you know is not the world that is anymore, and how do you respond to it? And then while this is happening, suddenly this very large monster comes up out of the ocean and starts wreaking havoc. And what do you do? It probably is going to end up on a lot of people's things. As a side note, there's another foreign movie that made a little bit of steam, not to the level of Godzilla, called Sisu, S-I-S-U. It's not on the list. It's being described as a World War II version of John Wick. Kind of is. It's fun. It just didn't make my list here for the conversation. Number 9 on my list here so far is Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom, in my opinion, is probably the movie of the year, depending on which box you're in. I'd say 9 or 10 I would put either as movie of the year. One probably in a more secular common world, but also if you talk the theme of movies growing up and dominating stuff, Sound of Freedom pretty much blew everyone's expectations. It was released a couple days after Indiana Jones, and it was released a week before. It was the next weekend they had a Mission Impossible movie. It outgrossed both of them. The word of mouth on it was huge, and it's kind of shocking to see that this movie made like $250 million because nothing had ever done that before. And the studio that released it also released a couple of the other movies in there, released The Shift, really that kind of thing. It really showed that Christian movies released right, allowing and theaters out there, they'll sell and throw in some hype and some quality, and they'll sell. It was a very well-made movie about a story that said that child traffickers are bad. And it talks about someone who had a change of heart from going and playing defense to playing offense. It's not a perfect movie. To me, the third act is unnecessary, but it's still a good enough movie to see at least once. The rest of the world, Super Mario Brothers, number 10 is on my list. And to me, if it wasn't for Barbie, I think people would be talking about Super Mario Brothers. Most of the lists I've seen don't even mention it anymore. This is the second highest grossing movie of the year, both in America and in the world this year. And it's probably the most successful comic book movie. And that also ties into what I said with the last movie I said. One of the side stories I didn't spend a lot of time on this list about, because if you want to find it, it's everywhere else. And that is the death of the comic book movie. That sort of comic book fatigue, or whatever you want to call it. There's 100 reasons why it is that way, but the reality is that comic book movies don't pay out the way they used to. Something else is going to replace that void, and I'm feeling like comic book movies might be being replaced by video game translations, because they don't suck anymore. Super Mario Brothers did a perfect job of translating its source material, appealing to the main audience, but still being really enjoyable. At one point in time, I remember hearing there's a song that Bowser sings, voiced by Jack Black. It was actually the #1 streamed thing on, I think it was Apple iTunes or something like that. It was everywhere. Sonic kind of showed it can be done. It's been doing a couple hits that way. But I feel like that may be one of the next directions to go as far as film goes. Because there's going to be a void as these superhero movies die down. Something's going to have to fill that space. And I don't see a pattern yet, but I think there is going to be one. If I had to put money on something, I'd put it on anime adaptations, because I don't see anybody, Americans properly adapting anime and manga, or comic book, or video game stuff. But that's for 2024, and we're talking about 2023. Later we can see how right or wrong I am. That is my list for the year. As stated, it's about the list for 2023. This year, I'll pause and let you guys see my thoughts. There we go. So if you have any cool comments on those thoughts, anything you feel like I'm missing that it should be on my list that I'm not aware of. There are certain movies not on the list that I saw. I only reviewed movies that I did see. So there's a bunch of this big mainstream stuff that I looked at. I went on to thenumbers.com, which gives you, I don't know where they collect the numbers, but does box office earnings, that kind of stuff. Went down there to see most of the movies I saw. And there's a fair number of the big budget movies I just didn't see. I didn't care, and I didn't have the time to watch movies I don't care about. If I get a big enough channel, maybe I'll start watching them. But at this point, it's still, I'm going to watch what I want to watch, and I guess share what people care about and what I want to share with people. Otherwise, everyone has have a happy new year here. Have a really good 2024. If you like what you saw, as stated earlier, go ahead and hit the like button. If you have any cool comments about my list, things that you think are crazy, things you agree with, things you think I should have mentioned about 2023 as list on my list, go ahead and put that in the comments. Otherwise, go ahead and hit the subscribe. Everyone have a happy new year here. I'm going to say that for a couple times for the new year hit. And thank you for your time. Bye.